And the rabbi's job is to protect, to make a fence, right, Mr. Haber? To make a fence. There's security, right? It's a different type of security. I don't think I ever mentioned it like that, right? We have security to protect people from physical harm, and there's a police department to protect people from spiritual harm. And the rabbis are part of that, are the leaders of those, are the captains in that police department. How do you like that, David? Every everybody is also a supposed to help out in protecting, but the rabbis are the ones that are the ones that are the main police department to secure the Jewish community. Okay, we are in 18b1. What we were discussing yesterday, we were discussing, Beis Shammai's opinion, that Beis Shammai says that not only you have to rest on Shabbat, and not only your animals can't be working for you on Shabbat, right? But your utensils, according to Beis Shammai, cannot also work for you on Shabbat. That was the opinion of Beis Shammai. You can't have your mill running for you on Shabbat. The water mill, even though you put in the wheat before Shabbat. According to Beis Shammai, if you're making wool, you want to dye the wool, and you put the wool into the pot with the dye. In order that the dye should catch onto the wool, you have to make sure that that was completed, the process was completed before Shabbat. The fact that you put the wool into the dye before Shabbat is not enough, because the process is continuing on Shabbat, and that's being done by your utensil. So Beis Shammai says that's a problem. Beit Hillel says there's no problem. Beit Hillel says he's under the impression that there is no problem for your utensils to work for you on Shabbat. You can't work on Shabbat. Your animals can't work for you on Shabbat. Your slave can't work for you on Shabbat. But your utensils, right, David, could work for you on Shabbat. That's the opinion of Beit Hillel. But we're going to see there are going to be circumstances that Beit Hillel will agree that your utensils can't work for you on Shabbat. Meaning to say, regarding the issue of utensils working for you on Shabbat, Beit Hillel says that's not a problem. But sometimes there might be other problems, other issues, other concerns, not that your utensils are working for you on Shabbat, but maybe you might come to do certain sins while your utensils are working for you on Shabbat. That is we're going to see, that's going to be a thing that Beit Hillel is going to have to be, if there are concerns, so Beit Hillel will be concerned. So the Gemara now is addressing Beit Shammai. We said yesterday that Beit Shammai allows the gofrit and the mugma, when you want to smoke the garments and you put it underneath underneath the pot, you put it above the pot that has the fragrances, or you want to sulfurate your silver utensils. And as long as you did it before Shabbat. Good morning, Ralph.
Morning, Rabbi.
We're at 18b1. And as long as you sulfurated it before Shabbat, even though if the process is continuing on Shabbat, you're allowed to go ahead and Beis Shammai allows that. And the Gemara says, how can he allow that? Your utensils working for you on Shabbat. So the Gemara said, because you didn't put the sulfur into a utensil, you didn't put the spices into a utensil, rather you put it on the ground. Right? Good morning, Ronnie. You went ahead. The last thing we said yesterday is that you had some money, you put some coals and you put some spices on the coals, and then that fragrance will be added to the garment. So therefore, since it's on the ground, it's not a utensil. So Beis Shammai holds it's not a problem if you did that, if you set that up before Shabbat. Similarly with the sulfur, if you put the sulfur on the ground, on the fire, and then the darkness and the sulfur goes up, and you had on top of it, you had the silver utensil, and it darkens it, that's not a problem. That's what we said yesterday because it's not in a utensil. Now the Gemara asks the following question. Okay, Beit Shammai says that there is a problem. Good morning, Emmanuel. Great to see you on the screen. Beit Shammai says that there is a problem with your utensils working for you on Shabbat, right? Correct? So now the Gemara asks the following question. Gigit, welcome back again, Simon. Bruchim Aboim and Simon and Adam coming together. We are on 18B1. We want to fill up the room. Oh, here comes Nathan. It's coming. The room is filling up. We want it to keep on filling up. Keep on. Okay. So the Gemara has a very obvious question, which we were thinking about a little bit. What does Shabbat look like according to Beit Shammai? Right? If Beit Shammai, good morning, Asaf. If Beit Shammai says that your utensils can't work for you, so what about if you light a candle before Shabbat? You have your lantern going, right, David? And even though the Gemara says Beit Shammai holds, even if it's passive, not being active, your utensil is involved in a malacha, right? You go ahead and you put the wool in the boiling pot of dye, and you did that before Shabbat. Beit Shammai says, and it's being dyed on Shabbat, right? So what is dyeing the wool on Shabbat? The dye that's contained inside the pot is just holding the dye and holding the wool. And Beit Shammai says that's your utensil working for you. So the Gemara says, hey, if you light a candle, you have a nice lantern, which is holding the fire, holding the fire that's burning. So why isn't that how does Beit Shammai allow that? Now, Beit Shammai wasn't living in the dark on Shabbat. Right. He's not like Tzaddukim. The proof is he also lit Shabbat candles late Friday afternoon, right? Beit Shammai understands it's a mitzvah to light candles for Shabbat. So if you're lighting candles for Shabbat, that means the candles are running on Shabbat. But according to Beit Shammai, that it has to rest on Shabbat, your utensils. How are you doing that? That's the Gemara's question. Now, the Gemara opens up with Gigit. Gigit is like a nice barrel that you soak the barley to make beer. Now we all know we all are very, we've been at Budweiser, the factory, to see how they make beer. I'm joking around a little bit, but we know the way they made the beer in those days. It took at least 8 days to soak the barley for at least 8 days. And therefore, the soaking was happening on Shabbat, and that's involved in your utensil, and it's making the beer. And there is a malacha. We'll have to see what the malacha is, but there is a malacha. There's an act of work that's being accomplished through the soaking, making the beer. Even though the beer is being soaked in a utensil in a nice barrel, we don't find Beit Shammai says, guys, you know what? We're not allowed to drink beer. We're not allowed to make beer. Beit Shammai has no problem making beer. The barrel is not necessarily cemented into the ground. It's a loose barrel. So it's a loose barrel, and you are soaking the barley, and it's a malacha. We'll have to see what the malacha is, but it's a malacha that you're creating. What you're doing here with the barley, you're doing an act of work is being accomplished, but you're doing it before Shabbat. Okay, I'm not doing it because I soaked the water before Shabbat. But it's true I'm not doing it, but who's doing it? My utensil. And Beit Shammai has no problem my utensil working for me in that case. Why? Similarly, the Gemara says, the case of the lantern, they used to have, common case was that an earthenware utensil that would hold the oil in the wick. Kedera, or what about a pot of food? What did Beis Shammai do with food on Shabbat? You want food, you had the food on the fire before Shabbat. You put the food on the fire before Shabbat. Let's say it was fully cooked. Let's say there's no issue of worried about you can stoke the coals. Um, and then the food, let's say, or let's say the case is if you have a raw pot of food, right? We're going to see in the Gemara where there's no concern, when there's no concern that you're going to stoke the coals. We don't find Beis Shammai has a problem putting on that food before Shabbat, even though it's going to be cooking on Shabbat, because you're not doing any. You're doing morning mark. You're not cooking on Shabbat. You did your action before Shabbat, and you're not going to come stoke the coals. Beis Shammai will not have a problem should not have a problem. I mean, so he also had the food on the fire before Shabbat, and why isn't he worried about his utensil working for him on Shabbat? That is the Gemara's question. Now, even if we're going to see why that should be different, but on paper, when Mark we're talking about according to Beis Shammai that is the concern of your utensils doing work for you on Shabbat. So how did you ever have a lantern running on Shabbat? But Mr. Nathan, on paper, if we're worried about utensils working for you on Shabbat, it's a biblical issue. So the fact that you're using it for Shabbat. If you have something that would overpower that, so there's nothing that's overpowering. If there is a Torah law that you have to go ahead and utensils rest, the fact that you have to enjoy Shabbat will not overpower that law. The biblical, if it's according to Beis Shammai, it's a biblical law based on a verse of the Torah that he understands. You will not you will not be able to go ahead and override it. I say docha lo saseh, but there's no Torah law. There's a rabbinical law to enjoy Shabbat. I mean, there is I don't know. I don't think we're going to I don't know that it's classified as a Torah law. And one of the proofs might be that technically a person who has a terrible dream, generally not allowed to fast on Shabbat, but if a person has a terrible dream and the dream is bothering him, he's very concerned. He's technically he could fast on Shabbat, but then he has to make up for that fast. If he's doing something wrong, I don't think he's violating the Torah on a Torah level, at least on a rabbinic level, that he's not enjoying himself on the Shabbat. I mean, that would have to be more analyzed, Nathan. Your question. There's no open pasuk in the Torah that says there is a pasuk in the Navi. In the Navi says the karota la Shabbat unek. You call the Shabbat a delight, an enjoyment. So that would be a source for that. Now, going back to the Gemara. So the Gemara is also v'shaput. You have a spit, and that's placed in a oven, and there is and there's food that's on it that's being roasted. Well, the Mishnah later on will discuss that, and the fact that it is being roasted on Shabbat, a certain amount being roasted on Shabbat, it says it's permitted. So how does Beis Shammai allow it? Why isn't it, the oven is working for him on Shabbat? It's doing the roasting on Shabbat. Yep. This is it's not cemented. It's not cemented. So the Gemara says, my time b'shar Beis Shammai. So the Gemara says, you know how Beis Shammai will deal with this? If he wants to have his light lantern burning for him on Shabbat, if he wants to have his bear working, be able to be soaked, for those 8 days through a Shabbat, If he wants to do any of these things, mafkir lehu mafkure. Beis Shammai would only allow it if you actually give up ownership in these utensils. What you would have to do is you would make ownerless your lantern before Shabbat. I don't own it, and therefore, if I don't own it, it's not my utensil working for me on Shabbat. I mean, he would just make it ownerless, forever. And so, so again, if I made the lantern ownerless, it's ownerless this week, it's ownerless next week.
How do you make it over? How do you make it ownerless?
Right.
You make a proclamation?
Very good. So very good. So let's say we make a proclamation. See, the question is, Tosfos brings out, discusses Ralph's issue. We find where Tosfos says, we find in the Gemara that says, you need to make, when you make something hefker ownerless, you do it in front of in front of 3 people, minimum of 3 people. So does the Gemara mean over here, you're actually going to have to go ahead and make a declaration in front of 3 people? Like, we do Hatarat Nedarim. When we undo vows, we do in front of 3 people. You're going to tell me we also need to have, we're going to have to go, point to Beis Shammai, he had, every time you buy a new pot and you want to go ahead and use it for Shabbat, you have to make it go in front of 3 people. Every lantern you go ahead and you buy, you have to make it own. It doesn't, Ralph is shaking his head. Rabbi, it doesn't sound so it sounds a little bit much. So Tosfos says, so one of the answers to the question, one of the commentaries say, is that actually the Beis Din, the court, is the court has the power, the Jewish court has the power to make hefker, money that belongs to me, they could make it ownerless. And because there's things that are in a certain category, like Nathan was touching on before, things that are category, things that we need to have going on Shabbat. We need to have the lantern going on Shabbat. We need to have the pot going on, people need to have that food cooking on. They did everything before Shabbat, and they did it in a way that there's not going to be any roasting of the coal, stoking of the coals. And it's it needs for a person. The court has a power that this should be hefker.
Did you say roasting, that he allowed roasting?
Yeah, yes, there was a roasting. The Gemara is going to talk about putting the Pesach, the carbon Pesach, which you had to roast on a spit, right? The Torah says it's roasted over a fire, where you're not allowed to go ahead. The Torah says you're not allowed to roast it on Shabbat. You're not allowed to roast the carbon Pesach on Shabbat. If Friday night, if Friday would be the 14th of Nisan, and the 15th would be Shabbat, you would have to roast it before Shabbat on the 14th. You eat it on the 15th at night. But you're allowed to go ahead and put the meat in the spit and let it roast in a way, whatever the case was, that there was no concern of stoking the coals. You were allowed to go ahead and have it was roasting on Shabbat. We're going to have it's a Mishnah later on, and Beis Shammai did not disagree. Meaning you put.
First you said you did it before, and now you're saying you're doing it on Shabbat.
Right. Meaning to say that the roasting is continuing on Shabbat. Meaning
today we don't know. That's not allowed.
Okay, we might have issues of stoking coals or other issues, but we know we might never.
Suddenly, Beit Shammai is lenient on such a thing. It doesn't make sense.
That right. Beit Shammai is lenient in the case of the roasting of the Korban Pesach, even though he holds that it's not Doche Shabbat. The roasting is not allowed to be. You can't go ahead and start the roasting on Shabbat. Right? As long as you did the roasting, as long as your involvement was before Shabbat, and there's no and the scenario is that you didn't, there's no concern of stoking the coals, right? Just like we said, if I take a raw pot of meat that was not cooked yet at all, and I put it up right before the Shabbat, and I'm not going to come to stoke it Friday night because it won't be ready Friday night. I'm not using it for Friday night. I could do that even though it's actual cooking is happening on Shabbat, right? So Beit Shammai holds there's a situation, whatever the scenario that you're, even though it's being roasting on Shabbat, but
Roasting sounds worse than just the crock pot cooking on Shabbat.
okay, but it's
Roasting sounds a little stronger.
they're
Like it
stronger.
sounds,
But remember, it's the same effect that's happening. The issue is cooking on Shabbat, roasting on Shabbat. It might be a little more intense because it's an open fire, like you're saying. Therefore, we have to figure out why there's. We have to figure out issues. Why are we worried about certain fences of protecting the people shouldn't come to stoke any issues with poking around with the fire, but the actual act, both situations, Mark, whether you use a pot or whether it's roasting or cooking, the malacha that's happening, the act that's happening is cooking or roasting. And Beit Shammai says, listen, Beit Shammai also agrees with the pot. He agrees. The Gemara says that if a pot was placed on before Shabbat in a way that you're allowed, that where there was no problem stoking, even though it's cooking on Shabbat, Beit Shammai says it's allowed. Similarly, by the roasting, he says it's allowed. It was done before Shabbat. The Gemara's question is why? Your utensils are working for you on Shabbat. Beit Shammai says you can't. That's what can't work for you. So the Gemara says he made it hefker. He made his utensils ownerless, and therefore it's not his utensils that are working for him. So, but there is an opinion that says that he doesn't actually have to make it hefker. He doesn't actually have to make a declaration in front of three people. Rather, the court, the Bezdin, the Jewish court has power, certain power, which is called hefker, bedin hefker, that the court has the power to take my money, something that belongs to me, and give it up and take it away from me. That's a strong power. Obviously, we have to see more details of that. There's that rule. There's an official rule out there. What the details of that rule is, like every rule has details, talk to the lawyers, right? How far does it go? When does it go? What's the area? But there is a concept hefker, bezdin, hefker. So therefore, in the situation when people need this to happen, people need the lantern to be on Shabbat. People need their food under certain circumstances to be cooking on Shabbat, right? So the rabbis will go ahead and help facilitate that. And again, according to Beit Shammai, I think we need the rabbi's intervention here right, Simon, to help me be able to have that lantern on for Shabbat, to help me, because you know what? There are many Jews out there that don't even know there's an issue. They don't even know, according to Beit Shammai, they don't know there's a problem for having my lantern, the wick and the oil in this lamp, and my lamp is involved in work. My utensils are involved in work being done on Shabbat, right, David? So what did you say? Right, he'll cover anybody, any Jew who wants to have a lamp on for Shabbat. According to Beit Shammai, the court, there's a general, the Bezdin, the court says anything that needs to be done to help that the Jewish people need, for that it's a basic need or basic. We're going to make a morning mark. We're going to go ahead and we prepared the Gemara for you. That it should be that we're going to make it hefker. Now we're in 18b1. So the Gemara says the following. Man Tana l'hadatana Rabbana. Who is the author of the following Braita? Lo tamale isha kedera asasiot v'turmusin. A lady should not fill a pot with different types of beans, which require a long cooking, and the night and the day is not enough. So if a person wants to eat beans for what we call melava malka, Motzei Shabbat, Saturday night after Shabbat, there's a mitzvah to escort the Shabbat, that just the Shabbat queen that is left with a meal. It's a mitzvah to have, to set your table, to have bread, to have, if not bread, other foods to show the honor that the Shabbat has left, escorting the Shabbat. So let's say they on the menu is the beans. They want to have beans Motzei Shabbat on Saturday night. And what do? Is they would have to put it into the oven before Shabbat. It's a 26-hour process. This at minimum, it's a minimum of 25-hour process. The night and the day is not enough to cook these beans. So the guy's going to put it in before Shabbat to eat it after Shabbat. So what does the Braita say? Don't do it. Don't do it late Friday afternoon. Because if you do it late Friday afternoon, there's a concern they may be going to go ahead, and we'll see what the concern will be. Maybe you're going to stoke the coals on Shabbat to make sure that it cooks a little faster, so it'll be ready right after Shabbat. We'll see what the concern might be. So don't do it. Now, if you did do it, you violated the rabbi's law. The rabbis say, don't do it, and you didn't listen. So the Motzei Shabbat asurim. The Motzei Shabbat Saturday night, we're gonna say you can't eat those beans Saturday night. We don't want you to gain from your act of sin. If you're gonna go ahead and gain, if you're gonna go ahead and use it Saturday night, the beans, that means you gain from not listening to what the rabbis fence. So the rabbis were strong here. They were strong, and they said you have to wait. How much time would it take you for to make these beans? You wanted to gain by putting it in before Shabbat, and therefore you had a 25-hour. You gained 24 hours on the deal. If you went to put it in before Shabbat, you would have to wait till after Shabbat, right? I would have to wait till after Shabbat to start to make the beans. So I gained 5 hours by putting it in before Shabbat. I would have to wait after Shabbat 25 hours, and then I could eat the beans. So it's not gaining. You shouldn't gain by putting it in before Shabbat. You got what we're saying over here?
What's the difference? What's the distinction between 23 hours, 26 hours? If I ate it on Shabbat, it'd be okay.
No, he can't. These beans, you won't be able to eat it on Shabbat. We're just saying, because these beans are you're saying about something else. Right. The Gemara is yeah, these beans, we're going to see, even Beit Hillel is going to agree there's a problem with these beans. What's the problem? Why the rabbis tell you don't do it? Why the rabbis don't put up these beans? Because the rabbis are here to protect. I said it in the beginning of the class, the rabbis are the security. And therefore, they're afraid something that takes so long to cook, you might get a little antsy, and you might on Shabbat start poking around to get I want to make it ready faster. I'm concerned maybe it won't even be ready Saturday night. I want it Saturday night. You know, if you have to talk to, you have to know if right. They have these beans that take a long time to cook. We should talk to the chef.
So it's not about cooking that area. It's about item.
Right. So exactly, that answers your question. The item and the way you're doing it. So it's not talking about that you're covering it up with covering the fire, like that type of thing. Talking about an open fire that you're cooking the beans. You're filling the pot with the beans. So it's a nice size pot with a lot of beans. And therefore, because it'll take a long time it sounds like you're filling up the pot. If you want to be filling up the pot, it will take less time to cook. And maybe we wouldn't be afraid that Saturday night that you're going to get nervous and start stoking it on Shabbat. That's what it sounds like. What is what's the language of the Gemara? Mark? Low. I mean, what's the language? You're saying again. What's the language? I'm going to read to you the language. You know what? Maybe we could get out the Shulchan Aruch. The language is look. Okay, the language of the Gemara. I am trying to infer. Good morning, Solomon. From the language of the text. What does the text say?
Yeah.
Don't fill up a pot. So to me, I want to suggest, again, we're going to see what, now we're taking out the language seems to indicate you're filling up a pot because it takes a long time and you're filling up a pot. Why did the language say don't place beans in a pot? Why does it say don't fill up the pot? So that's why I was, the important word, that's where I am working with. But we're going to take out the Shulchan. Here it's both. It's the item and it's how much that's in the item that we're concerned for. Reish Nun Dalet Sif Aleph. Let's see what he says in the Shulchan Aruch. You remember there was a guy. Let's go to the videotape, right? Yes. So let's go to the Shulchan Aruch. He said, Reish Nun Dalet Sif Ches. By the way, Mark, just for your that you'll appreciate, even though the Shulchan Aruch opens up that simon, even though raw meat you can leave on before Shabbat because it's not going to be ready Friday night, and you're not afraid you're going to come stoke the coals. But if you're roasting, that's by the fire. If you start roasting before Shabbat, that roasting hurries up this process, then you're going to be afraid you're going to come to stoke. So again, it's not the issue of the actual cooking or roasting. It's about the stoking. You remember? Yeah, I'm saying. I said if it's done in a way, the only issue with the roasting is what? Stoking. So if you do it in a way that's not won't stoke, it's not a problem. Okay, but again, we'll see more details. And let's get the chet. It shouldn't be any if you prepare it in a way that it won't stoke. In a way, you have to know how that would be. You know what I'm saying? Now, so it says don't fill up the pot. Let's see if any commentary says. Memhei.
Amount of beans that you did it in the bigger pots, so when you have full, you're not as concerned that parts of it won't get hot. Maybe.
Okay, so far I didn't see any. No one made the comment on that and those words, so we have to do a little more research on it. If it's done in a way, no. If you create it in a situation that it will not come to stoking, we'd have to figure out what roasting is an open fire. Again, even if you don't stoke it, you can't do something that has that ability. And even if you didn't do it, for instance, the guy. Again, let's talk about the beans. The beans, let's say he didn't stoke it, but he violated the law. The fact that I didn't stoke the beans, but I did not follow the rabbis told me. The rabbis told me don't put up this pot of beans before Shabbat, late Friday afternoon. It could be both. Because mixing the pot also hastens the cooking. We're going to see that in the Gemara as we talk about mixing the pot, moving it around. And you have to be careful. You don't move things in a pot on Shabbat if it's not fully cooked. You gotta watch out. That also would hasten the process. Technically, it wouldn't be the issue if it wouldn't be the issue of cooking. Whether there's some other concern, that's a separate look. But there's no that one shouldn't be a problem. But you wouldn't. We don't do it over the fire itself. You know what I mean? I would say don't do it while it's directly on the fire. On that part of the plate that's on the blech that's on top. What do you call it? The blech, right? The crack would also be the crack would again. The crack is also not so simple. You don't again the crack. See the crock pot. You see also you have to compare it to however you conduct yourself. See what we do with a crock pot is we put in a piece of aluminum foil, which serves as the blech. Right. So but then the same way, however, how do we take out food from a pot of, if we have a pot of cholent, we don't take off the food when it's directly on the fire. What we do is we move it a little it's off the fire, it's still in a hot plate, hot spot. I'm saying we have to treat the crock pot is just like it's just like a cholent pot on a blech. It's this crock pot is that pot that's inside that heating element where you place the aluminum foil before Shabbat. And so you should do the same thing. You pick up the food, we pick up the cholent, you take out the cholent, and that's how we do it. I can't tell you how to run. We pick up the cholent pot, we take up the crock pot, take out the food, and we put it back again. That's only if everything is 100% cooked before Shabbat. And whenever you're touching that crock pot on Shabbat, it's totally, if you're going to take out, some people, best is not to do that. The safest thing in Shabbat, I'm going to tell everyone this is the safe way to go. You want to make sure your food is totally cooked by the time Shabbat enters. Then you avoid a lot of issues, especially if you have children and grandchildren. What? Right, because you're dealing with people. Okay, that's when you're not going to be touching anything until tomorrow. But we have young teenagers a lot of times like to touch food. Young kids like to touch food. They don't want to wait till tomorrow. They want to have it Friday night. They get a little antsy. So for those situations, best thing is everything is fully cooked before Shabbat. You're avoiding a lot of issues. So back to the beans. But I'm just back to the beans. Okay. So the Gemara says, what is the reason for this? What's the problem with the beans? Is the problem with the beans, is this law of the beans you can't put in because your utensil is doing the work for you on Shabbat? Is it because it's a Shammai's reason that your utensils can't be working for you on Shabbat? Or some other reason? So the Gemara says, it says over here that you can't go ahead and remember, we said a moment ago that the Bezdin, that the court makes hefker, certain things, according to Beis Shammai, to allow you to have that lantern, to allow you to have that roasted meat that you needed for Pesach. But the rabbis will not, but that's only something that you need for the Shabbat. But something that you want for after Shabbat, you want the beans for after Shabbat. The rabbis are not going to go ahead and make hefker your utensil to enable you to go ahead and and have your beans for Saturday night. Put up your beans Friday noon. Put up your beans Friday early in the day. Don't put up your beans on Friday right before Shabbat.
They would make your pot hefker even if you wanted it for Friday, for Saturday night.
No, but the rabbis want you. The rabbis want you to. They don't feel the necessity. Don't do it. Meaning with Shabbat, you need certain things. Like you spoke about, there's Oneg Shabbat. You need to have light on Shabbat. You have to have a lamp, candles on. You have to have certain foods that you need for Friday night for the Karban Pesach. So the rabbis are happy to help you facilitate that. But just to have, you want your beans Saturday night. The rabbis say don't put up the beans late Friday afternoon for Saturday night. Put it up early. Do it that. Don't have the Shabbat. Point to Beishamai. Don't have your beans. Make your beans a different time. Don't make it over Shabbat. Exactly. According to Beishamai's meaning. Right. Correct. You're right. Correct. It should be finished before Shabbat. According to Beishamai, make it Thursday and Saturday, right? And have it ready. The whole cooking was finished Friday afternoon, and now Saturday night you're just warming up. But what takes the time is the cooking. Correct, Mark. Very good. Okay, we'll be to be continued. Fascinating Gemara. We love everybody's participation. We'll see everybody hopefully back tomorrow.
Rabbi, I have a rule. When in doubt, don't do it.
Exactly that. And by the way, when in doubt, don't do it. And Ralph, I will tell you, I'm going to add to your rule. Okay, first of all, when in doubt, first find out. Let's find out. Right? It's always best to find out. Until you find out, don't do it. But always, when it comes to speech, Ralph, if you're not sure if you should say something, don't say it.
How are you?
Rule in life. People make a big mistake. If you're not sure, Mark, right? If you're not sure, you know what I say, right, Mr. Haber? If I'm not sure if I could say something, it's a suffix. If I'm doing a sin, I'm not doing a sin. What's the acronym? WAIT. Wait. Yes. Why am I talking? Okay, very good. Right. But I'm saying, but even if I'm not sure, it's a question. Even something not close. If everyone eats something that's about joy, if I say something, you might not be close to it. You might be here or not. It's good to tell people.